that scares the crap out of me, right?
Either I'm doing something really well or I fucked up really bad. One of the two. Yeah.
This is something that is a 50-year war.
Welcome, everybody. This is Tuesday Morning Grind, episode number 62. And with me, I have 4 repeat visitors of the podcast, 4 cybersecurity leaders, researchers, hackers. We have Chris Roberts with us. We have Mike Weber. We have Luke McComey and Mike Jones with us. Welcome, everybody. So a little bit different format today because we have folks that know so much about the security space. Is how we'll do this for people who've listened to this podcast before. Is I'm going to throw topics out and just let you guys talk and let's hear what you have to say about it. And I'll try to be graceful about interrupting to keep us on track here, but I don't think I'll be able to do that. So first question or topic is when you think about cybersecurity, and I think I talked to you about this, Chris, last time we were on the call, is there's a balance between conformity and non-conformity. And there's also a balance between rule breaking and following the rules. So from y'all's experience, what is that balance? For those of you who have been arrested before.
Well, I'll jump in on that. It's interesting. In my career now, I'm 44 years old, and in my career now, I very much am focused on business, right? And day to day, doing things that make a difference to help people and help organizations that I'm working with. And it's something that, Mike Weber here was one of the greatest bosses I've ever worked under. And I worked with him for 5.5 years and learned a lot in the practice I was working at with him. But when I think back to my youth, I got in trouble a lot. I ended up in front of the law because of things related to hacking and computer security many times, which was difficult because my father is a law enforcement officer and I came from a very political family in a very small town. So it would always make waves. And for me, it was never about good or bad or right or wrong. It was truly about curiosity. It wasn't that I was trying to be malicious. It was almost always that I was just trying to see if I could get something to do something that it wasn't supposed to. And I know that that's kind of that cliche hacker answer, but it's really, when you look at examples of like stuff that I got in trouble for that I can talk about, with like DirecTV and stuff that happened with, computers clear back into my school district and places where other stories have come from, that's all stuff where I wasn't trying to do something bad or wrong. It was more of a, did you hear that if we do this one thing, that it'll make it to where we can see every channel on a satellite dish? And when you're a kid, right, that's amazing, right? It's this, oh my God, that's not supposed to happen. And I can make that happen by doing a little research and figuring out how to abuse this. So for me, it was never the black hat, the white hat, none of that stuff. I never really aligned with that. It was always really the best hackers I've seen and the best people who have really succeeded in this industry are people who are driven by curiosity, right? They have this aptitude where they just want to understand how it works and how to make it work better, usually.
Yeah, Luke, and I think that's you're actually hitting on a good thing there. The people who are looking for how to do things different, and sort of lends to what Christian was saying about the conformity and non-conformity thing. And in an industry that is driven by standards, right? Best practices, things like that we're supposed to be building secure architectures to. That's really a conformity thing. And then we have this perception of the information security industry as being a bunch of non-conformists trying to be able to break things. I find all that kind of funny, really, when you get right down to it. The first black hat I went to, oh my goodness, I'm sure I don't compete with earliest black hat date with anybody here, but I remember when I went and all these non-conformist individual people, and I thought this could be cool. I go there and first thing that strikes me is everybody's in their black t-shirt, khaki cargo shorts, and black shoes, and that's an interesting thing for a band of people who are non-conformists. I thought that was very interesting that everybody is. It was an industry of people who stand out and who are very unique, yet they come together on this common bond. So there's this weird commonality across everybody who was there, which showed up and manifested in, obviously, in the thought patterns and whatnot, but also in the black hat uniform, as I referred to it as.
Yeah, I think the conformity is non-conformity. And to answer your question, Christian, I think for me, I just recently learned that line of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And I think that's an everyday challenge for me. Like, I guess it depends on my mood and what I'm looking at and how exposed it is. And if I think it's crossing a line or if I don't. But I try to stay on the business side, even though, that temptation is always there. I don't think that ever goes away.
I think it's interesting because a lot of it, to me, a lot of it comes down to morals and ethics. There are definitely times when you step over what would be a legal line, no two ways about it. But you're doing it. A perfect example: if you're working as part of an organization to look after and safeguard kids, if you're doing anything to try to help other humans, there are times when that legal line absolutely gets crossed. But what are you doing it for? Are you doing it for your own means, your own ends? Are you doing it to help others? Are you doing it to raise awareness? Are you doing it for the betterment of society? Are you doing it to do what we should be doing, which is protect? If we're doing it for those reasons, argument for and against for doing it. But to me, it's, a lot of it comes down to, can you stand up in front of whomever you feel you need to stand up in front of, be it community, deities, or other things, and go, hey, did it for the right reasons. I think if you can answer that effectively, then I think, and again, exactly to Luke's point, which is curiosity. I still do it now. I got yelled at 3 weeks ago because of the bloody, the new Webb telescope. I'm sitting there. I've got the plans and the designs for it. I wanted to go make friends with it and talk with it. Pure curiosity. I just want to go say hi to the damn thing.
What about when maybe the right thing requires you to break the rule? And that's kind of what you're getting to, Chris. Like, I think about things like, let's say, flaws in major security software, and you're thinking about responsible disclosure, or you're thinking about when the stakes are really high and maybe there's someone's health or something like that is on the line. What do you, because I guess security is in this weird space, especially in the hacker space, where there are actually instances of times where you have the capability to break a rule, but it might be necessary to do so. What goes through y'all's head in terms of like the risk calculation or thinking through how to do that? Instead of asking permission, ask for forgiveness later.
I think it's a perfect view of that is what we have at the moment, which is the right to repair. So the middle of this country that feeds this country and other countries is in a massive battle over autonomous systems that basically run our food production. And yet we have an industry that for several hundred years has looked after itself, has repaired its own systems. And now we're at a point where right to repair is obviously a huge issue. And who are we turning to? We're turning to people in former Soviet countries to help us understand how to repair our systems. There's something wrong there, definitely.
What about in the privacy space? Because to me, that's like, you think about what the government's doing in terms of mass surveillance. You think about guys like Edward Snowden or Julian Assange who had to, you can argue whether or not they should or shouldn't have done that, but they at least themselves apparently felt that they should release that information. You have stuff that the social media companies are doing in regards to privacy that maybe everyone's not aware of. So where do y'all fall on the privacy issue in terms of? Yeah,
I think with Snowden, it's been proven in the appeals court that what the NSA was doing was actually illegal and unconstitutional. I don't have any thoughts regarding if that was right or wrong, because we all kind of knew what was going on anyways, and he just made it evident, right? Mm-hmm. With Assange, that's a different story. It depends on how you look at it. It depends on what you believe as far as what he did and what he committed to, and who was involved, and if innocent lives were affected due to what he did. I don't carry an opinion for Assange. I try to just, look the other way when it comes to him and let the law enforcement and other people sort that out, because there was a lot of questionable things that went on that I don't know if it's true or not. I don't think any of us know. That's between him and the government, really.
You know, Mike, you and I had this conversation personally, and I'm going to go ahead and go there. I don't have an issue with transparency. I think it's incredibly important. I think we should all try to be very transparent in all of these different arenas where and how we can. But when you leak information that directly results in the death of fellow humans, I have a big problem with being openly transparent about that. And what I'm specifically referring to are border agents who were working, down in Texas and Arizona and New Mexico and other places. And these people had a career in law enforcement. And whether you like cops or not isn't what I'm here to argue. It's more the fact that they were doing their job. They had families. And then because of the leaking of information and things that were there, you watched officers and their families being targeted. And to what cause, right? Or to what end? There are certain things that, when you work in the government, there are classifications that exist where you take oaths, right? That you're not going to talk about these things towards the greater good of national security or the greater good of humanity in some cases. And it's not that not being transparent in those situations is a bad thing or a good thing. It's the fact that there are reasons some things aren't just out there. And in some of these cases, we have to remember, going back to just like the way we talk about scoping engagements and doing work to replicate real world type attacks, the bad guys don't follow the same rules we do. If we are trying to do things that are good about bringing light to the world and being transparent and trying to make a difference in the world, we have to remember that sometimes playing by our rules is the better way to go, not necessarily adopting the rules of what we find as evil or not morally valuable. So again, I don't have a personal comment or opinion about either of those two gentlemen, but I do think that there are times where being transparent has hurt us as well. It's a hard conversation to have, but I think again, you've got to really, when you're doing this work, it goes back to exactly what Chris was saying. Morals and ethics. What is going to be the impact of the choice and the decision you make? If you hack something and you then do a huge data dump and you make that information publicly available and that results in people's deaths, that's on you.
I think it's so. Let's go back to the agency. Ironically enough, the shirt I'm wearing. Let's go back to the agency, and it's a bit of a hot topic, but most people can't look after themselves in the digital realm. Snowball's chance in hell. So we have two options. We either play Darwin and we just kick back and watch, goose some cup of tea and watch what's happening, or we step up and see what we can do. Now, I've got two options on that one as well. You either knock on somebody's door and say, hey, by the way, I've tried explaining exactly why for the last 25 years we need to have a conversation about passwords. I've also spent 20 plus years talking about firewalls, and you all haven't listened. So either I wait for something to happen, at which point you go, oh, good grief, I should have done something 25 years ago, or I just keep an eye on things for you. And in those instances, hate to say it, for the most part, I'm just going to keep an eye on you because it's a lot less freaking hassle than having to argue with 330 million people who are armed to the teeth to defend their constitutional rights, yet have absolutely no fucking clue what to do in the digital realm.
So think about what I think about is you see the speed of technology, and sometimes it feels like we're doing things faster than maybe thinking it through fully. And a couple examples for me is autonomous vehicles. We're probably going to be on the road with fully automated vehicles before they're locked down. You think about things like Metaverse. There's probably going to be whole businesses plugged in with technology attached to their brain before anyone's thought about actually securing those devices. So what do you guys think a world looks like? And I want to get into Metaverse, because this is coming. It's going to be the new social media platform, a new economy, a new way people are working. COVID's probably expedited some of that. What do y'all think about that? Like people living and working in the Metaverse?
Dude, we can't even do a shopping cart right. I mean, come on. That scares the crap out of me, right? The whole concept. It's amazing the kind of technology that we can put out as a species, I guess. We're doing great things, but man, the things that can go bad get worse and worse and worse. Fortunately, we're kind of narrowing in on how to make that impact less. But man, I think the things that could happen, I think the things that will happen, like aren't even. I don't even think we can grasp how horrible they're going to be, or how bad off it's going to be. And when I mean horrible, I don't mean apocalyptic. I don't mean that kind of bad. I mean bad just as in dumb bad. There's going to be a brand new level of dumb that is going to be far reaching with these new technologies.
Well, and if you look at just what happened just recently with the potential sexual assault that happened in the metaverse, I mean, we're taking people's personalities and their IQ level in the real world, and we're putting that into a digital format, which scares the hell out of me. I don't know if you ventured off into some of the wee places in the South, but I would try to avoid interacting with those people in the metaverse for sure.
Yeah. Well, Facebook has a tractor trailer that drives around, and they're getting volunteers to sit in the tractor trailer nude and take pictures of them, like a million pictures, to digitize the human body so that presumably you can create an avatar. And they've been working on this project for 3 or 4 years. I have a client that helps with that project, actually. And I was blown away to hear that. So when you think about that kind of thing, it's like, I wonder how far ahead they are of us than we think, because they're already digitizing humans, So it's crazy.
There's digitizing a human, and then there's integrating a human. So the digitizing, It is what it is. Some of the stuff I'm working on at the moment is actually synthesizing human. So a bunch of work on not just pulling signals out, but seeing what signals we can put back in again, but primarily pulling out to look to see one of the systems I run behind here knows before I do when I want tea, when I want food, what I'm actually going to do, some other movement. So it's doing a much better job of predicting where I'm going and what I'm doing before I know it consciously. So it's watching signals out of the brain, all those kind of good things. That's where I'm concerned, because we are moving towards that much more of an integration point. And again, we're doing it with default passwords of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus. And by the way, somebody's microphone is rubbing up against them or doing something. We keep getting a bunch of feedback.
I think it's Mike.
Mike, you're eating your microphone.
I think it's just your headphone, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
We'll edit it. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's continued. It happens a lot. So I was just trying to say. But yeah, that for me is that back to Mike's point. I mean, we are going off the edge of the cliff. Now, the problem is, as humanity, we won't actually tumble. We'll just teeter along the edge of the freaking cliff for the next 20 or 30 years, somehow or other avoiding our extinction level event until who knows what. Hey, bud.
I think the most interesting to think about from the standpoint of metaverse and augmented reality and these is really when you start getting into the ability to influence human through the fact that you are creating a fully digital environment where you are integrating sounds and vision, and this is this fully immersive experience. So from the concept of being able to manipulate and mess with somebody's mind, or being able to implant ideas, thoughts, wants, desires, those types of things, there's plenty of research out there where we've seen that basic things like suggestive little flashes of video are enough to be able to put something in somebody's mind. Imagine if you were controlling an entire submersive universe that you're putting children into and that you're putting teenagers into, and you control everything that they can see and hear and taste and touch. You want to talk about ways to do neat little Pavlovian responses about the fact that we all recognize the hertz sound of the specific vibration that these cell phones make when a call comes through. And we all automatically know what that is, to the point where we'll wake up to respond to that sound because it's been put in our brain. Why? Because it's the cheapest little motor vibrator that they can put into these phones that's strong and powerful, and it happens to go at that specific frequency. Imagine having that type of control with everything you can see and hear. And now I hear about cool experiments where they're doing things where you can start smelling and tasting influences in these worlds. It's going to be amazing what you can mess with.
I kind of wonder about...
Imagine hacking it to where they think they're eating a strawberry and it tastes like chocolate.
That's a whole new version of influencer, man.
It's like the Matrix when they're eating the goop, and he's like, how do they know what chicken tastes like? It's kind of like that. Yeah, I think about the downsides of this. I know, just like the phone for myself, like how distracted I can become if I allow myself to do that, in terms of like just zero ability to focus. And some of the most deep thoughts require rumination, and that you have to like find some stillness in your mind and just let your subconscious thought bring itself to the forefront of your mind so that you can think deeply. But if you're constantly distracted with the phone, flipping through Instagram, the latest thing, like there's got to be a negative downside of that we're not quite conscious of, or at least not collectively as a species. And if you take that a step further and you plug someone into the metaverse where it's just like flashing lights all over the place, that's worrisome to me. And I don't think anybody has a beat on what exactly that would do to us.
Give me a seizure for sure.
Yeah. I want to talk about leadership too. So when I think about, from my experience, like we have a team called Renegade Labs here at Risk 360. That's our hacking team. Managing that group of individuals is different from managing my compliance team. For example, labs, they get their own branding. They're very good at self-managing. I know that they're going to do research. They have they have a lot of stuff that's unique to them. And I had to adopt my style as a leader to lead them and earn their respect. So from your guys' perspective, can you recall a leader in your past, or what do you look for in a leader, and how do you lead someone who's highly technical in your space?
I'll say right off again, Mike Weber in this chat with us is one of the best influences I have ever had from understanding how to connect and have a balanced relationship and practice. For me, with
all right, Venmo's coming your way.
You talk about the red team side of the house. You know, we're my practice right now where I'm at is about a year old, and 3 of the people who work on our practice are people who have worked with me in previous practices before, and we have been incredibly blessed and incredibly successful for our first year. And one of the things that I keep looking at where I see a lot of that success coming from is that we're all partnering. It's not about a chain of command. It's not about who's the boss. Yes, you know, by title, my job is going in and putting out fires. But when you look at the way that the team operates and the way that to have it be successful, people need to feel like they're contributing to a culture or to a family or to something greater, right? It's not just going in to bill hours and do work. It's not about pen testing if you want. It's not about just the technical work if you want it to be successful. It has to be something where people have pride in what they're doing and what they're creating and what they're being part of. And I think that's really one of the things that drives success. And if you want to be a successful leader, you have to listen to people to try to figure out how you can enable them to do that.
I would add on this one, especially with us in this world, leading teams of us is definitely a challenge, but it's also pick the fight. I had a fantastic boss back at the Limited, and Dave was great. Dave knew when to give a bit of extra rope, and Dave knew when to go, hey, sit down and, listen up. And, we were in the middle of a large corporate environment. And so he was very, very successful at navigating both the corporate world and our technical world. So I learned a lot from him about taking and translating, technical speak into more corporate, more business focused, more risk focused. And then, both of our, his boss, and eventually who became my boss at a different company, learned a lot from them about, again, we talk about risk, we talk about mitigation. So there's language, there's culture, there's freedom, there's... The flip side is we're not special snowflakes. We need to also be part of a business. We can't and we shouldn't be completely out there on our own limb, because that then separates us completely. The fact that we have to call something DevSecOps because we can't actually use the word collaboration is very, very concerning. I mean, you think about it, that's all DevSecOps is, like, hey, let's talk to each other. For Christ's sakes, let's just talk to each other. We shouldn't have to give it a fancy name, because we, security folks, for all of our special snowflakeness and our craziness, need to know how to integrate with the business more effectively than I think some of us probably end up doing sometimes.
I think one of the biggest profound statements that one of my former bosses, Llewellyn Derry, said from NEC is that you never know everything, and it's okay to ask questions. And like Luke, I was just talking to him this morning. I had like a dilemma that I've never experienced before, and I don't have all the answers. And I make sure that if I'm in a situation with my employees that, if it's something I don't know, I'm going to tell them, hey, I don't know, but I'll go find out for you. And I think that level of transparency and that level of getting down on their level and saying, hey, I'm no different than you are. And there's no way I can know everything about cybersecurity or even what we do, but I'm willing to go find out and bring it back to you. I was giving a talk in Dallas last year, and Llewellyn, I haven't seen him in like 15 years, and he shows up to hear my talk. And I think staying engaged and the people who really make an impact on your career and your personal life, I think that connection is something to be valued. And I don't think a lot of managers and leaders out there really know how important that is. So,
Mike, you're apparently the guru. Like, what have you done? Like, there must be something you're doing, because I've heard this multiple times. Ryan McGowan, my team, who I think knew you from a prior life, and Luke here have kind of complimenting you on your abilities to manage pretty large team of technical subject matter experts. What do you think you're doing right?
What do I think I'm doing right? Nothing. I don't think I'm doing anything right. So maybe that's the root of it, right? Maybe it's that I know that I'm fundamentally flawed. I don't know the answer to anything. In fact, I don't even think I've had a good idea in my entire lifetime, right? When I look at it, I think when you hear the phrase imposter syndrome, I think, oh my God, I'm the poster child for imposter syndrome, right? And you look at this stuff, and I don't know what I've ever done other than I'm completely open and transparent with everybody I work for and with and interact with. I don't pretend I'm someone else. I'm just who I am. I'm authentic, and I have a bunch of failures. There are a bunch of things wrong, and I understand there are things wrong with everybody. Everybody has things that they can work on, and I think by being someone who can associate more, or maybe has the same common issues that the team does, that maybe that's something that's more relatable, and being able to take these things and sort of overcome them while working outside of the group, right? Because we're kind of one small family, if it were, one big family in information security, and we're all kind of the same. We have that same common sense, or common lack of sense in certain cases, and being able to have those same traits, yet drive the team in spite, or even actually more like in honor, or with respect of all those traits. Perhaps that's it. But people say those things, and I'm like, I don't know where they're getting that from, because I'm just winging it.
Mike, you hit a good point on this one, which is the human aspect of it. We've all screwed up. I think it's being able to take a step back and go, hey, look, we screwed up. I'm a poster child for certain things not to say on the internet, let's be perfectly honest, and among other things. But it's being able to take a step back and go, hey, I've messed up. And be able to take those lessons and, to your point, give them to others and say, look, do me a favor, you're going to make mistakes, but try not to make the same bloody ones I did. That's a huge part of it. Walking in with that level of hubris, walking in, instead of going in, well, I'm the boss and everything's perfect and just follow me, we'll be perfect. No. Walking in and going, look, Titanic was my poster child. Let's have the conversation about what not to do. It is a hugely disarming set of statements and conversations to have. So I think you hit the nail on that one, definitely.
Great.
Another thing, I'll close with this one, Christian, on this topic at least, is listening to everybody else talk really brought something to the top too, which is listen to your people. Listening to them is huge. Just knowing what's going on and I don't mean just about business. I mean, talk to them about what are they going to go do that weekend, and just connecting with them is huge. I see a lot of people, when I think back about the different, bosses I've had, and I've had plenty, they're those bosses who are still my best friends today. I've worked for Chris Roberts. I've worked for Mike Weber. These people are still my best friends today, even though they were my bosses. And I'll be honest, both in companies that we're no longer with for various reasons. yet those relationships maintained far beyond them being my boss or my employer, because of their ability to listen and be transparent and connect with me. Like, I love these guys as family, not just as bosses.
It's great. I know all four of you really I've heard a few themes come up: the theme of authenticity, the theme of imposter syndrome, not just with you four, but others in the space. And then there's also this great personal brand that each of you have built online and with speaking events and within the community. And can y'all talk about that? Like, what is the balance of building a personal brand, staying authentic, and how's it impacted your career?
Accidental tourist time, I think, on that one. There's, I think the closest I've done to ever like researching a personal brand is try and figure out LinkedIn's sodding algorithms to work out when the hell I should and shouldn't post, and then probably forgetting most of those. But you hit the nail on the head with all of it. I mean, it's to me, okay, so this to me is personal. It's a respect thing. It scares the hell out of me a lot of times that people want to hear what I say. It scares the heck out of me on LinkedIn, the responses I get a lot of times. So it's having that respect. It's knowing that what you put out there is going to be taken to heart in some cases, and sometimes there's a little bit of fun with it, so you tell people. But a lot of times it's how can I help others? Again, back to that protect. How can you do something? How can you open people's eyes? But doing it as an equal, not as a superior, not as anything else, but doing it as no different than as if I was in front of somebody. Doing it as if I was talking to friends, family, anybody. It's treating others with respect. Sometimes I gotta admit, I get it wrong. I'll growl. No two ways about it. But I hope for the most part I could meet almost anybody that I talk to online and have exactly the same conversation with them face to face as a respectful one-on-one set of conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you hit it like right on the head as far as like being real and being genuine. A lot of it's accidental too. Like some of my posts that get the most views are posts about something personal in my life or a struggle that I went through. It has nothing to do with cybersecurity. And I think it's because people really want that human element. And I think once you bring that to the surface and put it out in front of people, they grab onto it, and that's what they want. I recently got contacted by LinkedIn, and it was kind of scary. It was a LinkedIn manager, and they wanted to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I said, okay, either I'm doing something really well or I fucked up really bad. One of the two. And it ended up being that they wanted me to do a class for them. They wanted me to try to be, one of those guys who teaches a class, which I've never done before, but whatever, I'll give it a shot. But I think a lot of it's accidental. And I think as long as you're true to who you are and you're open about your struggles, about your strengths, about your failures and success, I think people want that these days. They don't want the fake bullshit vendor stuff. They want people.
Absolutely. So it's interesting you say that, because we live in an age where I think there is a pretty significant fear of judgment. There's a devil on your shoulder kind of making you afraid to post that stuff, put yourself out there, all that negative self-talk. Yet the four of you have worked up the courage, and I'll use the word courage, to like give out free information, try to be authentic about it, try to, how did you do that? How did you take the step?
It's not courage at all. We're just that stupid. Like, I was waiting to say this. Like, you talk about building a brand, right? Like, I have become that guy, right? I have clients who call up who have no idea who Luke McComey is, but they sure as hell know who Pyro is, right? They'll recognize the 303 symbol on my arm and have absolutely no clue who my business is, right? And those are not things that happened intentionally. Those are things that come from being the loudest jackass who was drunk at the table telling a story that one time when 100 people came and crowded around, and then all of a sudden everybody wanted to hear a story from Pyro, right? Like, it's not something necessarily to be proud of. Like, my brand has been built around being present and listening to people. And again, like both Chris and Mike really touched on, being just another person there. I'll tell you who I respect. When I look at someone out there in the industry who is just rocket science smart, But if you've ever had the opportunity to spend just a moment with him, you'll know he's also one of the most genuine, kind people you'll ever meet is Kingpin, right? Joe Grant is a perfect example of someone who does this and leads by example in our industry this way, where I don't care who you are. I don't care what language you speak. I don't care what age you are. Joe Grant will sit down and teach you how to do surface mount soldering. And it'll be, it'll be one of the greatest experiences you have, because the man comes to you with light and love, and he's truly engaged. And, I think that that's something where when you talk about people who have built names in this industry, it's not always the people who are writing the exploits and the people who are doing the big, scary hacker stuff, or the people who have the biggest, baddest companies, or it's the people who choose to go out there and expose themselves and to meet other people and shake hands and teach others and learn from others and be the first one to say, I don't know anything about that. Can you please teach me? Like, can you please teach me that? And if you do that kind of stuff and you're open and honest like that, I just think it has a natural magnetism to it.
Yeah, and Chris was one of those guys for me, actually, because the first time I ever spoke in front of people, Chris was the keynote at Bank of America. I was shitting myself. I was so nervous, but Chris was back in the green room saying, what the hell is wrong with you? Just calm down. Everything's good.
Just get out
They're here
there.
to listen to you. You know that, right? Like, they came here to listen to you.
There's some power in that for sure. I think it's interesting. I don't know if this is specific to the security industry, but one of the phenomena that I've noticed is that it seems like the people who do the best are just people who are very consistent over time, and they're giving, they're good listeners. They're trying to mostly give back to the community. Like, people who do terrible or people who are salesy, like overly salesy, pushing an agenda. Those people usually don't, at least from my experience, don't appear to do very well. It's a lot of givers. And I don't think I could say that about most other industries. So that might be something special about our industry, perhaps.
This industry does not like to be sold. I'll tell you that.
We're a little too skeptical, I think.
I mean, literally just had a conversation with a C-level executive like yesterday, and that was his whole thing. Refuses to take sales calls, doesn't want to talk to salespeople, has zero interest. You call him up and you want to talk to him about 3D printing or the new welding machine he got, he'll give you 3 hours.
Yep.
If you want to try to sell him something, he's not even going to pick up the phone.
I think you hit the point there, as Luke. I mean, you hit the point there, which is interesting. And as you were talking about Kingpin, I was thinking about Eddie. And so, to me, the other thing I think this industry brings is a huge. There are so many of us that have not just a focus inside our industry, but also bring a lot of our other life to this. Eddie is a perfect example. I mean, Eddie, amazing to listen to, crazy amount of knowledge and experience. I mean, you talk about sitting down. I sit down and I'll listen to him when he has the leadership conversations. And then 10 minutes later, he's making these freaking works of art. And I'm looking around and I got like 13.
I've got one here.
Yeah, there we go. Actually, and there we go. Yeah. And so, the ability
there's about 20 up on those.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. And that, to me, I think is a huge part of it. I think it isn't just you're bringing your business stuff. You bring life. You bring the human to this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Next thing. So we are having. So you think about things like election security. You think about geopolitics. You think about Five Eyes, China, Russia, name your nation state, and cyber war. So this is something that comes up all the time with my clients because I think I have some kind of insider information, I guess. But where do you guys think we are from a cyber conflict perspective?
We're in it, have been in it, will be in it for a very long time. I think, so I made the predictions last year that this year was going to be the geopolitic tension-driven motivation for cyber attack and cyber, ransomware. Anything negative with cyber is going to be geopolitical driven. And just within the past 30 days, that's exactly what's happening. And what's sad is we're just now seeing this as a nation, as a world, but this cyber war has been going on for years. People have just been blind to it because when they turn on the TV, they don't see it in their face. The media isn't feeding it to them. But now you can't avoid it. You turn on Fox News or any of the other mainstream circuses that go on, and that's the first thing you see is ransomware. You see Russia is going to attack the critical infrastructure of the U.S. because of our interference with their border disagreement with the Ukraine and with the natural gas fight for the pipeline. But a lot of it's media driven, just like, back when murder was like the big thing and, oh my God, I can't believe how violent we are as a society now. Well, no, not a lot of that's changed. The fact is we're making it more available to people every day and force feeding, gigs of information about negative shit constantly.
I worked for the government for a stretch of time, and I worked for United States Fish and Wildlife. I sat in an unmarked building off grounds from the federal campus, and my job was sitting there with a bunch of other people who were much more talented than I was, helping protect the 9 endpoints where the public internet and the Department of Interior's networks would merge. And at the time when I did this, everyone would ask me what my job was, and I told them I counted fish and ducks for a living. And the truth is that myself and quite a few other security tribers and 303ers, and I'm not going to out anybody for where they've worked and not worked, but we were employed because of something that was related to the Norton-Cobell litigation. And this was when Russia had targeted and attacked Alaska servers and had gotten information about Native American trust lands and precious metals and oil rights and all kinds of other things. And Congress responded to that by hiring all these different people that were extremely talented in cybersecurity. These are not government employees before. These were all contractors, myself included. And we came in to try to help put some controls and to try to help assess and just tell them how bad off they were. That was 2001. When you go out and you hit crest.gov, which is a cool site for those of you who haven't played with it, where they publish all of the Freedom of Information releases that have been done. It is hosted by the Central Intelligence Agency. Really neat website. Check it out. If you go search for cyber warfare or for computer warfare, you'll see that we've been in this battle since the late 70s. And far beyond that, but the 70s was when we watched this huge rush where people were just trying to have the most processing power, right? Cray Systems, SGI, all these others. And there were all kinds of government actions going on there. To Mike's point, this is something that is a 50-year war. And people are just now tuning into the fact that it's been being fought this whole time.
So we'll go back. A really good friend, Ryan Cloutier, says it probably perfectly. We're analog humans in a digital world. And because we're not clambering over bodies to get to the keyboard, because we don't open the curtains every day and see a bombed out building, we don't feel the consequences. And yes, ransomware is one. But again, in so many cases, it happens to somebody else. It happens to friends, family. It happens to, it's such a shame it happened to them. I'll be fine. And because, again, we're not clambering over a physical body to get to something, the consequences aren't felt. And I think that's going to change fairly soon. We start looking at body area networks. We start looking at all these other types of issues. And you talked about automotive transportation and all these other things where that convergence is becoming more and more. We're at a point where basically we can kill people because of our connection to the internet. Mm-hmm. We have been for a while, and there's an argument to say we already have done a fairly extensive amount of damage. But now our ability to influence more and more and more is becoming more apparent. And unfortunately, I think until something happens, it's going to be a challenge. So we've been at war for a long time. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But it just hasn't been in people's sights.
I think part of that is it doesn't sell.
Yes.
Right? That is not nearly as sexy and provocative as 400,000 people's personal information. It's consumer level, right? They own that information. It really hits home. Those things of financial impact, and those are the things that make the news. The things that are, there might be, and there could be, and this might be a little bit of espionage, and it'll eventually make a really good story, or movie rights or whatever down the road. Not to play down the importance of international cyber espionage, but the point is that doesn't really sell on the surface. But those other things, they're scary. They're the things that make those are the things that make the news. Those are the things that are consumer level. And we look at ransomware, and I mean, what's in the news right now? What's actually funny? Here I am stealing topic. I'm gonna redirect this from scary things like, international cyber warfare to Super Bowl. So, what I saw in the news today was ransomware hit the 49ers the day before the Super Bowl. The day before the Super Bowl and the 49ers, and with the situation in the Super Bowl, it's like, that sounds to me like somebody forgot to disable the cron job, right? Because that would have been the most awesome ransomware attack in the history of the world, to be able to disable someone's sideline computers and the whole operations thing the day before the Super Bowl. That's going to pay off really quick. But when I heard about it, I'm like, oh, wrong team. Who'd have known to attack the Rams, right? But that was hilarious. Anyway, that's the kind of thing that makes the news. Yeah, I mean,
here's the challenge, though. I mean, we all remember like DSW getting their asses handed to them 20 years or so ago, give or take a few years. Yeah. And at that point in time, as anybody, not just in IT field, but as normal people reading the newspaper, tar and feather the leadership, how dare that might happen, it's an awful thing to go on, good grief alive, front page news, the whole lot. Now, the Muppets down the corner lose another couple 100 million accounts, and everybody's like, and just keeps on trucking.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it has to do, too, with what the government really wants you to know about what's going on as well. I mean, it's cherry-picked as far as information goes. They're quick to talk about how Russia is aiming at the critical infrastructure of the U.S., but do we talk about how the U.S. was involved in Stuxnet?
Right.
I mean, it's very one-sided and very blinded. They tell you what they want you to know, and send you to Target and Starbucks to get your daily coffee.
I'll edit that part.
I think one of the bigger parts here, is really when you start realizing that it's not. It is, to Mike's point, so controlled by the media, and I'll show you where that has impacted an industry dramatically. Because of the dark side attacks and because of the news that came out around it being something where MFA could or could have not, maybe did stop an attack, maybe was the source of the attack, all of that discussion led to what? Now every single cybersecurity insurance provider requires what? MFA, because it was the hot topic of discussion, right? And we're going to see that over and over and over again. I'll give you the next example. I just talked to one of the largest insurance providers in this country, and guess what's the next thing coming for all of you with your compliance? Continuous testing and continuous evaluation. They're starting to figure out that this once a year scratch at the surface little pen test stuff is not good enough, right? Because we're seeing companies that are DSWs, targets, what would be a great one? Equifax, great example, right? Massive data breaches from companies that are worth billions of dollars that are getting compromised because of stupid mistakes, small things, little things that were preventable, right? In most cases, it's not necessarily because a human got hacked. It's because we didn't patch an Apache server, or because we have trusted networks being tied into a vendor that's controlling the air system inside of a store, or why do you have to have this type of stuff the way that it is? And that's really what we keep seeing, is that people are starting to figure out, I need segmentation, I need segregation, I need different things that are broken up to where different parts of my network can't talk to each other, can't see each other. And yet this is the same thing we've been preaching for how many decades? Yep. But it's just now, because of the news, starting to make the surface, right? You watched, because of news coverage of a cyber attack, you watched the entire South freak out and go fill cars with plastic bags full of gasoline. This is a perfect example of how the news is really controlling what you're seeing about this cyber war. It's far scarier than that. I mean, again, to Mike's point, there have been hacks that have impacted the enrichment of nuclear materials used for weapons, right? That's the kind of hacks that I'm talking about that have a real impact that you may never, ever even hear about.
Hey, you know what? If you keep putting those damn enrichment things in the UPS system and have the vendor come into the UPS, what else are we meant to do? That's fun to play with. It's fun to speed things up every now and again.
Can you imagine what it costs to ship a centrifuge?
So last topic, and we have this backdrop of the things that we're talking about: cyber war, a significant problem of cybersecurity that's not going away. That's, if anything, as we further digitize, becoming a bigger and bigger economic problem. And then you look at the security service provider space, and you have people offering $1,500 pen test, or audits that are ineffective, snake oil salesmen offering this product or that product. And for the uninitiated, the non-security practitioner, it is confusing. Like, you don't know exactly what to do. So you're relying on a batch of security leaders to come in and set the record straight and try to do the right thing. So what is the right thing? What does right look like for you guys as you're working with businesses and encouraging them to do certain things? How do you approach that problem?
It's simple. How is what you're doing delivering value and creating a positive change? It's that simple. If you ask yourself that question, then it really becomes, how can I, even to the point of how can I steer my clients to make sure that they're getting the best value, even if they don't pick me. One of the things I tell people when they're going through the bid or the scoping process with this is, if you really want to be able to compare apples to apples, ask these companies, what are their differentiators? Why are they better and different? Also, ask them for transparency. What's the level of effort going to be? Sure, you're going to charge me $50,000 for a pen test, but what does that translate into of billable hours? How much of that time and how much of this money is actually being spent on people sitting here doing work, and what they're delivering? And my favorite, by far, my third favorite thing, or my favorite third thing I'm going to mention, does that make sense? To ask people for a sample deliverable. Make them prove their work to you. And remember that when you're reading the sample deliverable, they've likely put a lot of stuff together to make it look as pretty as it possibly can look. But it will give you an idea as to how they communicate, and whether or not they're just giving you a list of vulnerabilities for you to go throw in the trash can and ignore for another year, or whether or not they're actually giving you good remediation and good advice and helping you prioritize what's important to make a difference in your environment.
Yeah, and I think going to work with Luke was really eye-opening, because I'm used to that. Let's charge X amount for a pen test, do the pen test, roll out. But with Luke and his team and what we do, it's more of a relationship. It's more of a trusted advisor. What can I do to help you? And even some of the ones who aren't security, they're not signed up for security, we're still helping them dig out of ransomware, or helping them with breaches, even though they're not a security customer. And I think that's what everybody is looking for. I keep banging this drum of the human element and relationship and being genuine and really trying to help people. But that's what works. That's what sells. And that's what's important, is that human factor and trust, not just some big name on a billboard that you can walk into a business and sell a pen test for $20,000.
Yep.
It's about relationships.
Yeah, you hear all these businesses, they want to do something that's scalable, which ultimately means productizing it and delivering as many as you can. And I'll tell my team, I'm like, hey, do stuff that's not scalable. Like, listen and listen extra long, and then be their friend.
Yeah.
And then if they call, pick up the phone and help them out, even though they didn't engage you for that service. Yeah. But I think in the long run, that's what moves the needle.
I mean, even
at least that's my philosophy.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
Even security services as a rule, right? So my take on it is similar to what a good friend of mine's take was. He was the EVP of sales at a former place of business. We're talking about, well, y'all are in sales. And he's like, no, everyone's in sales. Sales is everyone's job. It's like, oh, I get it. Okay, different thing that helped me really visualize what the objectives were. But it's the same thing with security. I think the answer is that they're not in security, and we don't provide security services. Everyone's in security. Security is everyone's job. Security has to be part of the IT curriculum from start to finish. Because without security, you don't have reliable IT operations. A little bit of that's kind of a dirge really in information security, but it's true. And I think when you look at what the right way to do it is, the right way to do it, I think, is having it be an ubiquitous thing. It's a requirement in everything that is built or done. In fact, I hardly know of anything in the commercial world that's been shipped without security of some kind. It may be ineffective, but right, it's still got a feature of it. somewhere. And I think the right way to address that, there's testing and all those assessment and consultative opportunities that I think we all have here in what we do in our professional lives. But I also think there's a big hole in I'm going to say general technology consulting, and the place I'm at now, Productivity, has a huge technology consulting arm that has a great view of security. But man, that's an uphill climb, right? Because that's kind of like, where do you start? Well, you start from everywhere all at once, right? It's kind of hard to really put a box around. So,
yeah,
for what it's worth.
So I'll add a little extra into this one. I think, Christian, you said it, which is, as an industry, I mean, we're our own worst enemy when it comes to dealing with customers. We don't have enough accountability in our industry. We are not held accountable. I come in, I promise you, I'll protect you. I will 100%. I'll protect you. I'll take care of you. I'll put this zero trust endpoint quantum bloody box in, and it'll be perfect. And then it is
magic box.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my magic blinky box, and then it isn't. And there's no recourse. Limited recourse. There's limited recourse. I keep on going. So for me, from a consumer standpoint, it's that validation. It's to Luke's point and to everybody else's, we need to do a better job of actually handing them that questionnaire and saying, hey, whether you pick me or not, I actually do and don't care. But here's 10 or 20 things to ask somebody. We need to put that out in a more effective way. But we need that transparency. We need the trust and verify. Honestly, verifying, and maybe I'll think about trusting you. But honestly, I want the accountability, because I think without it, everybody, or so many organizations, run rampant, and there's no recourse. That's got to stop.
We've covered topics today from personal brand to leadership, cyber war, what right looks like in the security field. So if you're listening to this and you want more of this type of information, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the links to each of these folks on the call, in the conference call, and the podcast today in the description. So if you're watching this on YouTube, check out the description. I'll make sure that you guys can get to whatever projects this team's working on there. And gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Hey, thank you for watching Tuesday Morning Grind podcast. If you like content just like this from cybersecurity executives, thought leaders, hackers, then come on over to risk360.com. Check out our resource center where we have blog posts, white papers, videos, all for free that can teach you about cybersecurity. If you want to know more about cybersecurity certifications like ISO 27001, SOC 2, PCI, High Trust, and others, we have a ton of content on that. So whatever you're looking for, we have a lot of resources. Head on over to risk360.com, shoot us a note, and we look forward to keeping the conversation going.